think back to 2005. Maybe you had a blog. Maybe you were posting every day on a forum with people you'd never meet in person but somehow knew pretty well. Maybe you uploaded photos to a service that felt permanent, left comments across a dozen sites, built something small on the internet that felt genuinely like yours. Where's any of that now? For most people, the honest answer is gone. And not just your personal stuff, entire communities, entire archives of human expression, conversations that took years to build, just deleted. The common explanation you'll hear is that servers are expensive, companies change priorities, nothing lasts forever. That's technically accurate. But when you look at the actual scale of what's been lost, and more importantly, what's being actively removed right now, the story gets a lot harder to write off as natural decay. There's a name for what we might be heading into, the digital dark ages. The idea that future historians look back at this era and find almost nothing. Not because it wasn't documented, but because the documentation was selectively removed. And the more closely you look at it, the harder it is to call that accidental. So let's actually look at what's happening and who benefits. GeoCities was shut down by Yahoo in 2009. When it went offline, it pulled 38 million user-created pages down with it. Personal websites, fan communities, hobby projects, amateur research, the accumulated work of millions of people who built their own corners of the internet by hand. Yahoo's stated reasoning was cost. Running the servers wasn't worth it anymore. But here's where that explanation gets strange. Before the shutdown, the Internet Archive managed to save around 650 gigabytes of content. Preserving most of GeoCities would have cost Yahoo, one of the wealthiest tech companies in existence at the time, roughly what a mid-sized company spends on breakroom supplies in a quarter. That's not a budget issue, that's a decision. What got deleted wasn't just clutter. GeoCities held things that existed nowhere else. Local history pages built by enthusiasts with no professional incentive to write them. Personal accounts of events before the mainstream narrative settled. The actual texture of everyday life that no journalist or academic was capturing at that scale. None of it had commercial value. All of it was irreplaceable as documentation. That gap between what had commercial value and what served as authentic record maps almost perfectly onto what got saved and what didn't. And it's not isolated. MySpace wiped around 50 million songs in a server migration in 2019. 12 years of independent music from artists who had nowhere else to put it. Flash games, an entire genre of creative work that tens of millions of people grew up with, became almost entirely inaccessible when Adobe ended support in 2020. Almost none of it was migrated. Google has been running systematic purges of inactive accounts, which sounds like reasonable server management until you realize those accounts often hold the only surviving copies of photos, correspondence, and documents from real people's lives. The threshold for inactive keeps shifting. The warning emails are easy to miss. And by the time you realize you needed something, it's been gone for a year. The corporate explanation is always identical. Storage costs money. Nothing can be kept forever. That might have made sense in 1995. The cost of digital storage has dropped by roughly 99.9% since the 1980s. A full terabyte today costs less than $1 per year. The economics don't really explain the deletions, something else does. Right now, AI systems are being trained on internet data faster than most people have really processed. And while older platforms are closing and taking authentic human content with them, the internet is simultaneously being flooded with synthetic material. Some researchers estimate that by 2026, more than half of all text online will have been generated by language models rather than written by actual people. The internet was supposed to be the most complete record of human thought ever assembled. What it's becoming is a space where the authentic record quietly disappears and generated content fills the gap. Part of what makes this hard to resist is that synthetic content doesn't look obviously wrong. It's fluent, it ranks well in search results, and it consistently outperforms older authentic material by the metrics platforms use to decide what gets surfaced. A 2005 forum thread where someone was genuinely figuring something out in real time tends to rank below a 2024 AI overview summarizing what they said. The thing that performs worse by modern metrics dies. The optimized summary survives. Search engines have been tuning their algorithms toward freshness and engagement for years. Older content gets deprioritized simply because it's old, regardless of whether it's more accurate or more primary than what replaced it. So even when authentic historical records technically still exist somewhere, they become increasingly hard to find through normal discovery. They're not deleted. They just become effectively invisible, which accomplishes roughly the same thing. Future AI models get trained on whatever data is still accessible. If what remains is largely synthetic, posts generated by other models, articles written to maximize engagement, historical accounts that have been smoothed out for palatability, then those models will have a picture of the past built from a version that somebody else curated, not the actual record, the convenient one. You can already see this playing out. Search for primary sources on specific events or conversations from the early 2000s. What you'll mostly get are summaries written years later by people who weren't there, or overviews generated by AI pulling from other overviews. The original forum threads are dead links. The personal blogs are offline. The accounts from people who were actually present, those are exactly the ones that didn't survive. The interpretation outlives the record. Run that across enough topics and the pattern is hard to miss. So what's the actual incentive? A population that can't reliably access its own history is considerably easier to give a version of events to. If you can't verify what people actually thought, what was actually said, what the real sequence was, you end up depending on whoever currently controls what's accessible. Right now, that's a small number of very large companies with their own interests in how the past gets framed. And there's no real competing force here. The organizations with the resources to maintain comprehensive archives are often the same ones with reasons to be selective about what they keep. Libraries have burned before, government archives have been curated selectively, records have gone missing when they became inconvenient. What's different this time is scale. We've never had a medium that captured as much of everyday human experience as thoroughly as the internet did in its first 2 decades. Losing that is different from losing any previous archive. There's no archaeological layer underneath. Once digital content is gone, it's gone. The most public current example of this being contested is the Internet Archive. For years, it quietly did the work nobody else was willing to do. Archiving websites, digitizing books, building a navigable record of the web going back to 1996. Then several major publishers filed suit over its digital lending program, and the organization has been fighting expensive legal battles since. The specifics involve lending policies, but the question being put to the courts is whether a nonprofit can maintain a comprehensive public record of human publishing without the permission of the people who own the rights to that content. If the answer comes back firmly no, it doesn't only affect books. It creates a framework where the custodians of content have meaningful authority over what gets preserved at all. That precedent matters. None of this requires a central planner. Nobody needs to be in a room deciding to erase history. All it takes is a lot of organizations making individually rational decisions. Cut the costs, protect the IP, manage the liability, that collectively produce the same result. Less of the original record survives, and more of what's left has been filtered by someone with an interest in it. The practical response to all of this is actually very basic. Save things locally. External drives, printed copies, formats that don't depend on any company staying operational. The Wayback Machine lets you submit URLs for archiving directly. If there's a page you want in the historical record, you can put it there yourself. The Internet Archive runs on donations. If you've got old content somewhere on the early internet that still exists and you care about it, now is a reasonable time to act on that before the platform makes the decision for you. Because here's what's worth actually sitting with. If everything you ever created online disappeared tomorrow, the posts, the photos, the forum threads, whatever you built over the years, would anyone know you were there? And would anyone 20 years from now be able to find out what the internet actually looked like while you were living in it? Or would they just find whatever version someone with server costs and legal counsel decided was worth keeping? Drop a comment with whatever part of the old internet you miss most. And if you can still find it somewhere, it's probably worth saving. That's what the digital dark ages actually means. Not that the lights go out all at once, just that someone else ends up deciding which ones stay on.